Welcome. My name is Mr. Sunarine, and today we will be discussing what are some strategies for adding a mixed number to a fraction. Before we get into the lesson, there are three math vocabulary terms that I want to discuss before we get into the lesson. The first is proper fractions. Proper fractions is when the numerator is smaller than the denominator. Here are some examples that demonstrate this. The numerator is smaller than the denominator. The next one is improper fractions. This is when the numerator is equal or greater than the denominator. In these examples, we see that the numerator is larger than the denominator. And in this example, we see that the numerator and the denominator is equal. The last term is mixed fractions. This consists of a whole number and a proper fraction. Here is your whole number. 1 would be your whole number, and the 1/2 is your proper fraction. Now we're going to get into the lesson. First question that we're going to be discussing is, we want you to think about the fraction below. Tell me all you can think about this number. You can pause the video, write your responses, and then resume. We'll be moving on to the next slide right now. Now that you've had a chance to write your responses, we'll be going over some potential responses to these prompts. When we look at 19/5, some things that I looked at and I wrote down, there are 19 1/5 equal pieces. 19/5 is an example of an improper fraction. And remember, improper fraction means the numerator is larger than the denominator. The next prompt is, what does this make you think about fractions greater than 1? This makes me think about when I see fractions greater than 1, the numerator is larger than the denominator. We're going to be moving on. Here are examples of two diagrams. I want you to work through these and write your responses, and then you can pause the video and then resume, and we will be able to compare our answers. I'm going to be moving on to the next slide. Here in this slide, we have answers to the prompts. In the diagram above, we see that 1/4 are shaded. There are 4 equal pieces, which will be our denominator, and 1 piece that is shaded in, giving us 1/4. Therefore, 3/4 more are needed to make 1. When we see the 1/4 and the 3/4, when we add them together, we get 4/4. 1 plus 3 gives you 4 for the numerator, and then there's 4 equal pieces. We also know that 4/4 is the same thing as 1 whole. And notice how the pictures look very similar. And here are the responses in this above diagram. 3/8 are shaded, as we see here, 1, 2, 3. And remember, there's 8 equal pieces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So giving us 3/8. Therefore, 5/8 more are needed to make 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 5/8. Again, when we add the 3/8 and 5/8, we get 8/8, which is the same as 1 whole. Here is an example. 2 students solved for the expression 2 and 3/8 plus 3/8 below. What is similar about their thinking? What is different? You can take a chance to pause the video, write your responses, and then we will resume. I'm going to move on to the next video, the next slide. Here are some example responses that you can compare your responses to. Their thinking is similar in that they both added 3 plus 3 in the numerator to get 6/8 or 6/8. Here we see that over here, 6/8, and then we see that being added and we get 6/8. One way their thinking is different is one student used the number line and the other used words. Student A used the number line, student B used their words. What does this make you think about adding fractions greater than 1? We notice here that you add the numerators together, the denominator stays the same. Here's another problem. Add the following expressions in two different ways. One way must include a visual model. So we can continue to look at two different methods. One is a visual model and the other is a written sentence. You can use the same ideas in the previous slide to record your responses. We're going to move on to the next slide, which shows an example of each. Here's one way, a visual model, and here's another way, a written response. Take a chance to respond to these prompts, and on the next slide we will compare your responses to the ones I provided. What do you notice? For me, I wrote down in both methods we got the same answer, 3. When you add 2 3/8 and 5/8, we got 3, and here we also got 3 1s, which is the same thing. What do you wonder? I wonder which method will be helpful for me to work through similar problems. And I want you to think about that as what is the best method for you. You can use both, you can use one, you can use the other in helping you to solve similar tasks. What does this make you think about adding a mixed number to a fraction? In this example, I added the two numerators to get my answer, while the denominators stay the same. And I want you to think about this, and if you're still having trouble with this, write this in your notes because this can be very helpful to guide you in getting the correct response. We're going to move on to our summary. In summarizing today's lesson, to summarize your learning, record your responses to this question. What are some strategies for adding a mixed number and a fraction? We want you to write your responses here and any other notes you want to include in this space as well. In the next slide, we'll be providing some notes that I provided, and we can compare it to what you have already. Some strategies for adding a mixed number and a fraction. I can use a number line, and I can write out a problem as a math sentence. Here are some notes that I provided that you can write down in your notebook or record in your notes. When adding fractions, you add the numerators together. In this example, we add 1/5 plus 2/5 equals 3/5. Notice how the 1 plus 2 equals 3, and the 5, which is our denominators, did not change, which goes over here, the second point, the denominators does not change. And finally, when you have the same numerator and denominator, it turns into a whole. In this example, a fraction and a whole number, 4/4 means 4 out of 4, and it is the same as 1 whole. Hope this was helpful, and have a good day.